It's so funny. I haven't used Zoom in quite a while. We use Microsoft Teams at work, so it's almost like a second language here, kind of going back and forth. Anyway, but to start things off, why don't we do a quick round robin of who we are, and it would be great for me if there's kind of, hey, what's one thing that you're curious about that you'd like more information, and we'll try to do some customization of this. So. Everybody probably sees things differently on their screen, so I'm just going to kind of call around if that's okay. So Sherry Miller, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Sure. I'm Sherry Miller. I am president and president-elect of the Grand Island Rotary, hoping not to be president-elect next year. And I worked with Matt on my president-elect year in 2019 to do a strategic plan for our club, which I did really well through 2020 and half of 21. But as the pandemic went on, I focused more on recruiting new members, and I am getting 7 new members this year. So that was a good pivot, and hopefully we can relook at that strategic plan and revise it for the next couple of years.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherry. Nancy, if you wouldn't mind going next.
Okay, sir. I'm the secretary of the Norfolk Sunrise Club in Simcoe, Ontario. And excuse me, our club got our strategic plan just wrapped up in February of 2020, and just under the wire there. And so we're trying to figure out how to implement it. There were a few short-term actions that we've been trying to action, and just interested in finding out more.
Very good. Thanks, Nancy. How about June?
Hi, I'm June Mergel. Actually, we have 2 of us here from, I'm sorry, Monica, I didn't realize you were here too from our club, but that's okay. There were so many great workshops to choose from. And I'm really glad to hear Sherry say that in the past, I've really been scared of or horrified about the thought of doing strategic planning, because it sounds kind of like statistics and other stuff that I really don't like to do. So I'm kind of forcing myself to do this. And I was really glad to hear that Sherry said, through this manner, she was able to get 7 new members. That's phenomenal. I really think that's kind of our object. Our club is really looking to get more organized and get more members. Of course, everybody always is, but we've shrunk a bit, and especially with attendance and other things. And I kind of hope this will help us engage to bring new members on and get the members that we do have more excited about attendance and participation.
All right. Thank you, June. Carrie, anything different?
Good morning. My name's Carrie. I'm the president-elect of the Hamilton AM Club, and I'm going to echo what June said. I think it's how we do use a strategic plan to get people excited or enthused in what we can do with our club and where we can grow. So thank you. And good morning.
Excellent. Good morning. Thank you. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning. I can never find the unmute button on my phone. So Matt, it's good to cross paths with you again. We've spoken, several times throughout the years.
Yeah.
Quite a few years ago, I assisted with visioning in Area 16. And most recently, one of the smaller clubs in Area 16 participated with Governor Ann with a strategic plan and visioning. And I just saw enormous results within a very short amount of time. So crossing over from AG and going into the membership realm into the district, I just know how important visioning is. And I here this morning because I want to know how things have changed in the visioning world from several years ago to most current time, and really do want to work with you in the next year. because visioning is so important for the retention and attraction and membership in our clubs.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Yeah, we can basically touch on that. I mean, just briefly, I think the change has been that it's become very hybrid and it's become very customized, and it's become, I think, in a lot of ways more user friendly.
Excellent.
So we'll touch on some of those things. So awesome.
Thank you.
Kind of bounced around a little bit. That's funny. Phil Weiner.
Yeah, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good.
I'm treasurer of the Hamilton Tonic Club, past president of the Hamilton Club, which was the oldest club in Ontario and third in Canada. Going back to 2001, I was president and been in Rotary since about, I don't know, 50 years, let's say. Anyway, you know what, coming to this meeting, I wasn't sure exactly what I was trying to achieve, but the good news is I do now, because Sherry, I don't know what's going on in Grand Island, but if you've got 7 new members, I want to drink that Kool-Aid. I really, how many members do you have in your club, by the way?
Well, at the end of this month, when we induct our 4 new members, we will be at 18, I think it is. We had really had some attrition and had some trouble hanging on to some members that came in and then circulated out. So it was getting discouraging. And
Well,
yes.
I'll have to get in touch with you, offline and figure out what the heck is going on in Grand
So
Island.
I have to give some props to the district. Their 1, 2, 3 promotion helped. And the Rotary 101, being able to turn that over to the district to explain that rather than doing fireside chats, which our club never was very good at. And then doing follow-up after as part of that.
So one of the key people, I'm sorry to Matt to go on.
No,
here, but,
please. That's what this is all about. Is
one of the key people when you mentioned the district would be Ann, I guess. She would know about this, right? Ann Birmingham.
And Kevin Crosby is really, he chairs the membership committee, and it's just awesome. So another past district governor.
So Ann did run the session on Thursday night, and I participated in that. So that'll be a good video for you to watch in terms of some of the things that other clubs are doing.
Good. Well, I appreciate that so much. That's on the top of our list, I can tell you. Our club's about the same size as yours. And, we're like everyone else. We're looking for new members every day. And it's an ongoing challenge, let's say. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to listen in today and learn a bunch of new things about Rotary, and look forward to making some new friends as we go forward. So awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Phil. Paul?
Got to find the unmute. So I've just transitioned into recently the public image chair role of the Rotary Club of Lockport and joined the board, because that chair is not part of the board. So I've also joined the board. I've been president of a couple clubs, founded the E-Club, but I wanted to see what has changed and what we're doing now in terms of visioning and strategic planning for the clubs, so I can be a more active participant. Also, being responsible for the club's communications, visioning yields the key messages. The key messages are what should compel people to join the club. So I want to hear how we're working, how Rotary is doing that, and see what I can do to contribute to that, because I don't think our club is a wonderful club. We're 70 some odd members. We're growing, we're very active, but we don't really have good messaging. So I want to try to work with the board to help get us to where we have 2 or 3 key messages that we can use consistently throughout all of our communications.
Very good. Thanks, Paul, for that. So yeah, even on the growing success, and messaging in a lot of different channels to kind of look at. So, and let's see, who did I leave out? Sheila, it looks like.
Hi, I'm a member of the Dunkirk Fredonia Rotary Club with Michelle, who is actually the person who brought me into Rotary. I chose this session because I'm a believer in sitting down and thinking through a vision and then coming up with a strategy to achieve it rather than doing things willy-nilly.
Love that. So yes. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. That was another change. And I think, you know, the committee itself has been struggling a bit. And since I've been involved over the last 5 years, it started off as kind of a visioning committee, and then it was a futuring committee, and then it was visioning on one side of the border and futuring on another side of the border. And that was all fine and dandy. But then there was kind of this whole missing piece of, hey, this is great. We got all these papers and ideas and things like that. Now what the heck do we do with them? We have to actually execute on things. So that became the transition, I guess about 2 years ago, right around the start of the pandemic, of vision to action, which is really kind of, you know, taking all of this good work and putting it into action. So, and it's still very much a work in progress. So thank you all. Did I miss anybody? Was there Monica? Right? Sorry, Monica, I skipped right over you, but it's been
That's all
hard
right.
because everybody's dancing around on the screen here.
I'm the secretary of the Niagara Falls Club, and as I do the end of year, what is it for you, awards thing every year, I have to check off that we don't have a strategic plan. Our club has never had a strategic plan, and for the last 3 years as secretary, I've been trying to encourage the board to get going on one. We're an older club. We sort of do what we've always done. As June said, we've lost some members, but we also had a run of new members during the pandemic, but then some of them left because of work and other things. So we're sort of hovering around the 44, 45 membership mark. Anyway, I'm always interested in these sessions to sort of hear how people get going on this, because I'm not having much luck getting my board to get excited about doing a strategic plan.
Got it. Very good. All right. Well, we're going to kick in. I'm going to kind of, hopefully this will be relatively interactive. So, because slides are boring and, you know, me talking, I also kind of get a little earworm. So we'll try to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm going to show pictures and then we'll try to have some conversation wrapped around them. So put together a deck that looks like this. How did that work? Are you seeing something that starts with the pitch?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So there's a lot on this slide, actually. It kind of together, and there's kind of like in Paul's word of, you know, hey, how do we, you know, put these messaging things together, and what is there to this? But this idea of transforming and people of action, and basically our whole commitment to service above self and within that community. And we think about that and kind of go, what does that really mean? And then kind of within that, I think, you know, Paul really, he said it nice, which is, you know, hey, the vision really does put out that kind of key message, that key target of what we're all aspiring to do and within our communities. And if our target is too big, then I don't know how we boil the ocean. And I think in a lot of cases we struggle with that. And perhaps that's really where the strategic planning comes in. The process that we're going to kind of walk through is this idea of starting with a vision and then breaking that out so into the strategic thinking component, and then the actual execution planning of that, helping you take action. If you're taking action, hopefully it's something that's important. You want to measure the results. And then at the end of the day, there's kind of this circular process where we're going to come back around and we're going to learn and celebrate success. In the big picture of Rotary, which is helpful, right? Rotary has this kind of, well, I'll get to it in a couple slides. Won't jump ahead, but we can use this. Every club can use this as a foundation to build off in regards to how they see the world. So it's kind of, uniting and taking action in our specific communities means what to us. And I think, that's really the big picture of the visioning piece. And I guess I'm going to stop on this a little bit too, and kind of say, I don't know that we're born with this innate ability to just, create this magical 3-year or 5-year, 25-year vision. I think it's almost like, how do we see tomorrow? And in my mind, a lot of this stuff ends up being, it's almost like the same process as if you were going to prepare to run a marathon. You wouldn't go out and you wouldn't run 26 miles today. You'd start off with, I'm just going to get up and I'm going to do some stretches and I'm going to walk around the block today, but I'm going to do something. And I think within that, and we have to kind of keep that in mind as we kind of think about, most of us are pretty close to the starting line in this journey, and kind of go, I don't need to jump right into this, fully comprehensive 30-page strategic plan. A strategic plan might be a paragraph as we get started. So just want everybody to kind of keep that in mind. The idea of planning, right? And so kind of Alice in Wonderland and Cheshire Cat is a really, kind of fun idea on this, but, we can kind of poke and laugh. But unfortunately, it's the way a lot of us kind of run our clubs, and, beyond our clubs, kind of, into other aspects of our life as well. I think it's fair to say, and there's all kinds of documented proof, that if we have an executable plan, the club is more likely to be successful. This is, you'll see if you kind of work in, I like to scribble things down on the sticky notes. And this is just one of those drawings, and we kind of think about stuff. And if you look at the sawtooth portion of this and kind of think about the Rotary calendar, right? So every year we've got president-elects, we've got new people coming in, new people going out, a whole bunch of energy put in, clubs going in a good direction, but then kind of, right? So there's kind of this calendar year seasonality, sawtooth nature to things. And I think what this speaks to is really a strategic plan done well, or a plan done well, or a vision with some ideas done well, helps us build this kind of continuity between years that allows us to kind of change the slope of that line to where it's accelerating, to where we're more impactful, to where we're growing our membership. Because why? We've got this kind of connection to where we want to be in the future, and everybody that comes in attaches to that. So I'm a big Peter Drucker fan, and it's the idea, effectiveness is the idea of getting the right things done. And busy is not the same thing as being effective. And we trip up on those things all the time. We want to do everything. We want to do everything in our community, but yet at the same time, the irony is that if any of us reach into our community and did a community survey and said, hey, what do you know the Rotary Club of whoever to be known for in our community? I'm not sure that we would like the results. If you're not familiar with this particular piece of work, and you're in club leadership, I can't recommend Peter Drucker's Effective Executive strongly enough as a reference material. But just a couple of bullet points. We're not going to read through all of these. Presentation will be available, and this is all recorded. So, but the idea of putting first things first and doing one at a time and focusing on strengths, and feeding opportunities and starving problems, there's just so much good stuff on this slide that it's just, as a leader, if you focus on these things, you will be successful. Between thought, action, and effectiveness are some huge gaps, and we see this all the time within the work that we do. So it's easy to think about some stuff. It's really hard to put those things down onto paper, and then it's really hard to actually start doing them. And then it's really hard to start measuring them and giving yourself feedback to kind of go, hey, we're not perfect. There's things that we can improve upon. So And again, I would challenge us to be, remember that day when you're a kid and it's the summertime and the sun's at its peak and it's midday and you're playing around with your magnifying glass and, at first you're burning holes in paper and, then you grab the little spider that you just killed or whatever and kind of, think about that type of idea as we only have so much energy in our clubs. And, what is it what is that one thing really? I guess that's the challenge. If you take away anything from this presentation, it's really over the next little bit. What is that one thing that we really want to focus our energy and attention on? And how are we going to do that effectively? I'll say this, there was some talk about fear and fear of strategic planning. And I think the fear, right? Well, there's a slide that speaks to that because we help. That's one of the things that the committee does. We help overcome fear because we've done a few of these things. And really where the strategic planning and visioning world is going is to be exceptionally supportive. We're facilitators, we're consulting partners, we help you put together the plans. We help you kind of stage things so that you have a better chance of success in all this. But in essence, right, and this speaks to that, not all situations require the same level of detailed thinking and strategic planning. But at the end of the day, there is some sort of plan, which is who's doing what and when, and then holding people accountable. That becomes really important to this. And that's going to go back to kind of that running the marathon exercise again. Hey, the first time that you run a quarter mile or you run around the block, woohoo, celebrate that, right? Yeah, sure. There's going to be people out there that are going to be running 5 miles. Does that make a big difference? Not really, right? You met your goal. You did what you're going to do. So, and I guess important that the next time you're striving for 2 times around the block. With that said, I think a lot of this, and hopefully what we'll demonstrate is that this stuff is simple, but unfortunately it's not easy because it requires a discipline. None of this stuff is a one and done. You're never going to start with the perfect plan. It always involves some sort of iteration. There's kind of continuous outside factors that changed. For instance, if we had built a perfect plan in 2019 and then COVID hit in 2020, guess what? Your plan just blew up. So now what, right? Is it you rip up your plan? Well, not really, because if it's a living document, you're going in and you're modifying it and you're kind of going, ooh, okay, the world is changing really quick and in these directions. And how do we stay on top of that? And how is thriving Rotary clubs, how do we stay in front of that? In getting started, this idea of your club wanting to do this is really, really important. This cannot be, going back to that sun slide, it cannot be a factor of one. There cannot be just one champion of this thing. And, if you're one of those clubs where it's the incoming president and kind of going, I really, really want to do this, and you don't have the support of the rest of the club, it's a big challenge to try to do this process. When we talk about simple, it really is just this. It's, where are we today? Where ultimately, in this particular slide, it says 3 years into the future, but it doesn't have to be. It could literally be 3 weeks from now, or 3 days from now, or 3 months from now. But it's just this idea that we're taking a look at ourselves today. We're projecting ourselves at some point in time in the future, and we're taking a look at some of the outside forces that are our obstacles. These are the things that are impeding our progress, that are our challenges. And in a nutshell, this is really what the whole process is about. This is a little more complicated way of doing it, but another fun way to kind of look at this is kind of going, if you're planning your family vacation, do you just go? Most of us don't. But there's some constraints wrapped around this, right? There's kind of the, hey, what timing works for this? Who's all going to be able to go? Oh, because there's 8 of us going, we probably don't want to stay in a 1-bedroom apartment. So do we have $1,000 to work with? We can't fly we can't fly 8 people to Florida for $1,000. So some of the stuff, right, and that works into that. So if you think of strategic planning for your club, or one area of strategic planning or vision to action for your club, think of it in the way of, you're planning out your next trip to the grocery store, or you're planning your next family vacation. It's really not that much different, but there's just going to be a whole bunch of outside factors for you to consider. You're going to have a starting place and an end point. In between there's going to be a gap. And then ultimately our job is to help us put together this get there action plan. I do like this. Einstein was a pretty smart guy, and he's often credited with the quote of doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result is insanity. So we do that a lot in Rotary, at least in our club. Some best practices, the POCAT, our senior leadership commitment for 3+ years. Can't really say that enough. That gets over the sawtooth piece, right? So it's kind of got to be, we are committing to this overall process. And within the club, I mean, Paul mentioned, hey, within a bigger club, this is easy. We got a little easier anyway. We got 70 members and we got a board, and, maybe we could put together this whole kind of outside strategic planning committee and some other things. But it really is super helpful to have a project champion that is not the president-elect or the president. I'm just going to kind of let that sit for a little bit, and then build a little team, 2 or 3 people team around that person.
It's interesting to me that you're saying not the president-elect, because the year I did it, they were saying the president-elect should do this.
Well, in thinking about that, Sherry, and those are part of the lessons learned, right? So, which is, as the president-elect, you're certainly can have influence on this, but to actually own it for the 3+ years, right? Because at that point in time, we really weren't pushing this idea of project champion. We just needed somebody in the club that wanted to run with this. But that's led to several cycles of the sawtooth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not the continuity that we want. So that's really what we've learned out of that. So the next line on here is the other thing that we struggle with, and it's super important. So in a lot of our surveys, we survey internal membership, and maybe Paul can speak to this and helping us out in regards to the strategic planning and entrepreneurship. But there's an internal piece that has to kind of correlate with an outside piece. It's almost like 2 rungs of a ladder. So getting out of our clubs to understand what people outside of our clubs think about community service, think about, right, just kind of volunteerism in general, think about community needs, is so important to this process. And, again, in thinking about it, I can only speak for my club and some of the clubs that we've worked with, but we really have very little understanding of that other than an assumed bit. So I think that's one of the pieces that we've learned, right? In particular to recruiting new membership. So I can share kind of a story, and maybe Sherry, I know you said you had to drop off at 9:30. Maybe there's a few things at this point that you could share, like 1 or 2 key things maybe before dropping off, that have been super, super helpful for you in regards to, recruiting your 7 new members this year.
Finding a project that really captures the imagination of other members of our community outside of our club. So we did an Afghan resettlement project, and we advertised the heck out of it. We got the community involved in contributing household items to that family. And then that was the starting point, but we had such an outpouring from the community, we decided to go on and do the next phase, which was actually to go in, clean an apartment and set it up as a home. And from that, we got 4 members. Then the other thing is the inclusion of environment as a focus and the Greenway project. So we've got 2 members from that. And I do
So,
need to go.
thank you so much for sharing that. But, you know,
Certainly.
certainly those really speak to that idea of impact within the community and touching on things that are important within the community and how do we find those things. And right, but just because it's important to Grand Island doesn't necessarily mean that it's important in your community, but there certainly are those things in your community, but you have to kind of know what those things are. So, right, some of the other events that we do where we invest a lot of time in might be okay, but are they, you know, those things that at the end of the day kind of go, hey, we did this and we brought in a significant number of members. This other project that we did brought in no members. And using that as a metric for kind of circling around and kind of going, hey, in project prioritization of the 3 things that we really want to knock off this year, you know, what are those things? So that can be super helpful.
Can I chime in briefly?
Yeah, please, Paul.
One of the challenges in my entrepreneurship courses, the students create a business plan sometimes for a real business they intend to create. And many of them do social businesses. They want to provide basically create an NGO or a nonprofit. The challenge with Rotary and any organization like that is you have 2 target audiences. So you talked about surveying outside of the club. The people we serve very often are different from the people who we want to have join the club. Mm. And so we need to understand the needs of both. The people who are, for instance, if you have a homeless project to help homeless people in your community, that audience has one set of needs that we need to provide for. But if we want people to join the club, more than likely it's not that group of homeless people. It's a group of people who have the time and resources to be able to participate in helping that other group. I just want to make that distinction because sometimes we forget that we have 2 different target in a nonprofit. We have 2 different target audiences. In a broader sense, one audience is where do you get your money? Who's going to give us money to do what we want? The other sense is what's it needed in the community that our club what problem can we solve within the community? Sorry, I just wanted to point that difference out from a for-profit business.
Love that. And please, more of that. I mean, I think if all of this ends up being, rather than Matt running through slides, if it's, kind of within the team that's here and participation on that, it'd be great where we just kind of share those stories. So the last thing, I mean, there's a couple others on this slide. Again, there's too many words to kind of run through it in terms of PowerPoint presentation, but I do want everybody to get comfortable with this idea of ABZ. I grew up in the world of, 30-page business plans and, thoroughness and working things out, project plans and, kind of working on some super huge projects, $10, $20 million projects that stretch on for 2-3 years. And, on day one, you're asked to put together this extensive Gantt chart that has 700 things on it. And this activity is going to take 3 days and require these resources. And it's those type of things that really scare the bejeebers out of everybody in terms of putting together a plan. What I can tell you is every one of those plans, although ultimately successful, never finished without 5,000 edits. Right. And it was a total waste of time to put in all of those activities basically beyond the next 90 days. But what's super important is this is where we're starting from. This is really where we want to go. That's the A and the Z. And the B thing, which is the thing that we all agree to is the next most important thing is this activity. And then having some clarity around that. I'm not saying, you're kind of driving your car with your headlights on. So you want some field of vision on this thing, but you don't have to go crazy. And that's really, that works back to that idea of effectiveness. And the last thing is the straight out of Drucker, right? We can talk about this stuff all day. It's not until you roll up your sleeves and actually start working on this stuff and it gets messy that you're actually going to start learning. And it's actually going to start helping your club. There's no perfect way to put this in. And so that's why our recommendation is always to start small and don't fear failure. A really interesting, we've been showing this slide and apologies for kind of the way that it runs through, but the Dundas Valley Sunrise Club has been kind of, I think, on the forefront of at least the visioning side of this for a long time. And they basically hand out their membership. They do a 3-year idea. So this was done in 2018. They were projecting to 2021. And then what they were basically right on the top of it, we will have 55 members who are diverse, meet, have opportunities for engagement, and then into kind of the 6 ideals of service, you know, where we are. They've got just a couple of different bullet points in regards to what they're going to try to focus on over those next 3 years. More specifically, the 1, it kind of ties to year 1, and the 2 kind of ties to year 2, and the 3 kind of loosely ties to year 3. So, and then within our world of public image, they added another section down here at the bottom. And then their bigger picture vision is on the right side of this, you know, vision together, you know, we join together for the betterment of those in need. And in Dundas, we are known as leaders in community service, providing service to the underserved. It can be as simple as this, right? I mean, this is simple and elegant, and they've got some 4-way tests. They've got a couple of their big activities on their annual calendar. This is a really nice example. There's, you know, there's other examples that I can show you of things that have gone well, but everybody within their club carries this in their wallet. In essence, this becomes, you know, wallet size foldable. It's always right there for you as you wake up, as we're talking about our next project, kind of like, hey, does this align with what's on our card? It's a really nice idea. Paul, go ahead.
You answered my question. Because of the way it's printed, it looks like it's a wallet card. That's a really great idea.
Yep. No, we do one of these at work too with vision and values on it. And it's awesome. Like every meeting where you're kind of bouncing some stuff along, or somebody says something that's a little, you know, bit out, you're kind of like, you know, hey, we've got the card, and you're always going back to those vision and value statements. And it sounds simple. It may look a bit corny, but I can tell you it's super effective. So. Okay. Other super is another one of those things, more of as a reference point only, but Covey's another one of these guys that did a lot of really good thinking around successful people and the habits that you need basically to be successful. And yeah, it speaks to number 2 here is beginning with the end in mind, and number 3, put first things first. Speaks that really overlaps with where Drucker is. So, and being proactive and thinking win-win, it really does kind of speak to Rotary. So it's just as we start consider the work that we're going to be doing on planning and visioning, that's just a good thing to keep in mind. One of the really good things, we went back to kind of that busy versus effective piece. And just, you know, kind of the Eisenhower matrix or the Covey matrix is this, you know, really simple 2-box matrix, 4-box matrix, 2x2, that speaks to urgent and important being box 1. That's all our firefighting stuff that has to get done today. And we all know that thing. The urgent, but not, or important, but not, oops, excuse me, let me go back. The important but non-urgent pieces, all of the planning, this is where strategic planning, this is where our visioning, really the deep work should lie. We spend too little time in this box. So as a fun little exercise, if, you know, over the course of your individual day or kind of within your Rotary life, just kind of, you know, with this concept in mind, kind of jot down activities and, you know, what percentage of time you're spending in what box, and kind of go, that's interesting. You know, really the goal is, how can we increase our time in this strategic planning and learning box? Cute little slide, I guess, right? As we think about membership and happiness and unhappiness, it speaks to the expectation versus the reality. And the more we can get those things to overlap, the happier our membership is going to be. So that basically means that we have to know our membership and know what the expectation is. And it also speaks to know the community and what the expectation is, and then what's the overlapping reality. And then kind of as a last bit on here, kind of just to leave with, well, there's lots more within the presentation, but I would like to open it up to a few more questions or comments, I guess, at this point in time. So in covering things and kind of going back to the beginning, what else? I'm going to stop sharing for a second here, and then because we only have a few minutes left, I want those last minutes to include a couple of comments and then maybe a couple of last focus areas. There were some, I guess, in kind of kicking things off and going through, I can kind of describe our process. So our process in reaching out to Visioning and Action Committee is basically reach out to me, reach out to Sue Cerny, reach out to Ann Birmingham. We'll get back to you in regards to what goes on. There's basically, there is a slide in this deck that's a little bit later on, but it basically involves just the idea of let's get together and have a conversation first. Let's understand where your club is, where you're hoping to go, what resources you have allocated to this. And then within that framing, kind of putting together a timeline and a series of events that can happen. So the hybrid model allows us to basically introduce concepts 15 minutes at a time. They fit nicely into Rotary meetings. The pre-COVID version of strategic planning generally involves some sort of let's get the whole club together for a dinner for a 2 or 3 hour session and do a whole bunch of kind of whiteboarding and tying together surveys and prioritization work. So on sticky notes, and that still happens as well. And there's everything in between. So it has been for the past couple of years, it's been a challenge for us to get back and forth across the border. So we've been doing more and more stuff via Zoom or Microsoft Teams, but and we're trying to do what we can to service the club's needs.
Matt,
Yes.
I have a question. Coming from some clubs, I guess in my area. So you have members who may be seasoned members combined with new members who attend district workshops like this, and they go back to club meetings and they are absolutely on fire and they're so excited and they want to start implementing the new things that they've learned. The problem sometimes being that you have 1 or 2 members from a club attending, you bring it back and it's not met with, oh, it's one more thing to do kind of, and we've got this coming up. And how do you take that enthusiasm after something like this and keep it going and have it start and then keep it going at the club level? Like you did point out, if a president-elect and then becoming president wants to do all these things and it's met with lukewarm, reception from club members, where, what's the secret recipe?
Some things that, selfishly, right, I do believe like within that world, right, and you kind of go back to the Rotary slide and you go back to the breadth of offerings that Rotary has. There is a tremendous amount of things to pull from in order to service our communities. Now that is both a benefit and a curse. And within that, and you start to think, which one of these things, right, is really going to help us move the needle, right? In terms of increasing our membership, in terms of community impact, which are things that you mentioned in the Imagine Rotary piece ahead of time, kind of going, what are those things? So I guess my suggestion would be, let's bring this together and let's have a conversation about what some of these things are. And if there's a clarity wrapped around, is there one thing that we can do right now and get started? And literally, Michelle, just putting together a really simple plan for accomplishing that within the next month or 2 months or 3 months. So somewhere between a 30 to 90 day plan for that one thing, and just get moving on that one thing. And putting the other things, not necessarily killing them, but kind of talking about it and going, do we have the resources for a second thing? If no, then, you know, being kind to yourself and putting that in the parking lot. So if membership is, right, the number one focus, kind of going, what is that thing that we really need? What did we learn about membership that we want to pull together, that we really want to try to impact over the next 30, 60, 90 days? That would be my suggestion. But, and then opening the floor up to all kinds. This is really, it's a big challenge. I don't know that there's a great answer other than you have to do something.
Matt, a couple of us have put our emails up and asked if you could share the deck. So
Yeah, sure.
they're in chat. Another issue that I think our club faces is we have been successful in bringing in several younger members from the community as new members. One of them was told to join by her manager, who's a member at her organization. And we had lunch recently and I said, why did you join? She said, because I was told I had to. That isn't a great motivator for people to stay. So I think we also need to really consider the generational differences as we work with our planning for the future. My concern right now, and I've discussed this with some of our leaders, is we need to continue to engage and keep active the older and long-term members. But we also need to make sure that what we're doing and how we do it is satisfying for the younger members. And they have different needs. And you may have found this. I wrote to Rotary and they never responded. I know Rotary has done surveys. Why are you a member of Rotary? And they've looked at that generationally. They looked at across different age groups, and the younger age groups typically join Rotary and they're active because they're networking and can grow their network of community and friends. The older ones, more or less, are more active and are members because they can give something back. Mm-hmm. Those are two completely different motivations. Mm-hmm. And I would, if you happen to know where I can get that research, I wanted to share it with the club. Within the club, we have the same situation. I suspect those younger members want something very different from what the average ages deceased members want from the membership.
Yeah, Paul, let me. I'm gonna reach out to Kevin Crosby. I think Kevin's still part of Lockport, is he not, or is he totally Buffalo Sunrise now?
Kevin is Buffalo Sunrise, but Kevin has been in the hospital undergoing chemo, so I don't think he's going to be available to you right now. He might be.
Okay.
I know I had seen when I was director, district director, I saw this data.
There's
but I haven't been able to find it.
I will get that to you, and to a certain extent, you're completely correct. And we've done some community surveys. What we were doing within our club this year was kind of thinking about recruiting in a slightly different methodology that really opened up people's ideas to and to exactly what you were talking about. We asked everybody in the club to go out and talk to somebody in their inner circle, 1 to 5 people within their inner circle. And then, so doing some sort of demographics wrapped around that, right? I mean, we're not applying a lot of personal information to it, but it is, male 72 kind of thing. And then answers, what do you think about volunteerism? Is volunteerism different than community service? Different ideas kind of wrapped around that. If you were going to volunteer your time, for what purpose would you want to volunteer your time for? Those kind of questions. And then when you pulled that data back into kind of that superset, it really was interesting to kind of see, the differences, not only in language, but also within what people are expecting out of not only volunteerism, but community or public service. And, it's really interesting. And the club has to keep that in mind. And particularly if your club is striving for diversity within membership, it kind of has to be that way. So, and yes, to use that on a bigger scale, we can all overlay that into our clubs and it'll be super helpful. So, yep.
This is Sheila. I've got a question. I'm wondering if Rotary International and throughout the United States is kind of involved in a rebranding campaign to attract younger members. Like, I mean, I love the polio thing, but my husband's like, aren't there like 2 cases left? Why doesn't Rotary have a new action item? Like, he thinks it's kind of outdated.
I think I can say, Sheila, that Rotary is constantly rebranding, right? Every year there's a new theme that comes in that overlays. I don't think the service above self will ever change. But then in regards to what Rotary supports, and that's a really interesting question. So Polio Plus has been, kind of like the thing. And I think, quite honestly, the idea was it would have been eradicated 10 years ago, but unfortunately, there's 50 cases here, 100 cases here, 250 cases that pop up every once in a while that have been extending that effort. So I can't speak to that from a Rotary International perspective, but I do know that they want to finish that. So, and that it's a big effort, and Gates Foundation is still a huge supporter, and they match all the Rotarian dollars too for every one that we kick in. And anyway, but yes.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's super important, but I think
hear
when
you.
young people think
Yeah.
of Rotary, they're not
Right.
thinking polio is the #1 world problem.
It speaks to what Paul was talking about and asking about, I think, initially, right? Which is, getting our message out there and public image, and, what does that ultimately mean? And how do people identify with us within our communities? So, and that's a really, it's a big challenge, and it's evolving. Part of our challenge is that it's evolving really quickly in the younger generations because of the whole social digital aspect of stuff. And primarily Rotary membership is a bit older. We're not quite as good with our mobile phones and our Twitters and our TikToks. And, so there's kind of this growing disconnect in there. And it speaks to other difficulties that we can have within our club, unless going back to that expectation versus reality slide. And how do you get those things to overlap? So it's a great question and requires a lot more dialogue, might even, some single subject breakouts and things like that. I can provide, some feedback up to Lisa for that in regards to how we organize some of those conversations and share best practices.
Yeah, I was going to add that that's so important going forward with regards to the dynamics of today's world, that the world changes almost hourly, it seems, and we can never catch up with the next story before all of a sudden it becomes the past story. And Rotary must have those challenges on an ongoing basis. And you're right about the, polio situation going back so long now. And we need to focus, I think, on a rebrand that tells the world that we have a future outlook as well. I mean, there's challenges internationally, locally, in our own community. And as a club, we try to know our community better than maybe we focus on our community rather than more than the international market, let's say. So, you're right. That's a great point. I appreciate that. Also, I appreciate the idea of soliciting new members through projects. I don't think our club has ever realized that. And we formed a club that came from a previous large club. And we started off with our name of Tonic saying, we're not going to provide you a challenge at this point. We want to have you come into the community and tell us what you think is important. And yet, by doing that, we haven't been able to grow the club. So we need to have a focus more than we have, I think. And that's maybe what Rotary internationally needs to do as well. They need to have that focus rebranding on an ongoing basis. So
There's no question, Paul's probably more in touch with this than I am, but what I see within kind of the younger generation is that they're not necessarily willing to commit to a once a week dinner or breakfast club or whatever, but they are interested in volunteerism and helping out within the communities. Just, they want to be attached to things that make an impact. I think it speaks to what Michelle was talking about, which is our resources, our effort, our impact. And I know within our club, we've had some really challenging conversations wrapped around the difference between membership and participation. And right, how interesting would it be if we had, almost this body of volunteers that continues to grow, that enables us to do more and better work. And then, but doesn't necessarily grow your membership, but does grow your impact. And that gets into, right, some of these other things that are conversations within the own particular clubs that really do speak to that strategic thinking nature of things, and then kind of going, all right, this is kind of interesting. Maybe we want to experiment with this and put a plan together to check it out.
I can add to that a little bit. Our club has 18 or 20 members. We had a meeting last Wednesday, and it was a Zoom meeting and a hybrid meeting combined. We had 2 members at the live meeting and 6 members online. And yet, although very, very poor attendance at these meetings, when you consider 18 people and only 8 show up, our list of accomplishments in the community is outweighs that so completely. I mean, it's
right.
It's an embarrassment of riches in a sense. And the fact is that, it shows that you do not have to, in my mind, at least now, you do not have to be in attendance at all the meetings. What you have to do is be in the community rather than spending time, perhaps in a Zoom meeting for 45 minutes. It's more important to be in the community and realize, like, for example, we have a food fridge program in Hamilton that we participate in, and I think other clubs in Hamilton do the same thing, and yet we're doing that on an ongoing basis. And we don't need to report that to ourselves. We know that we're doing it. And so anyway, attendance at meetings is important, but more important is to get out to the community and do the work.
Matt, may I share a screen for a second?
Absolutely. Let me
I think it's authorized. You've already enabled it.
okay, perfect.
I just didn't want to jump in.
Yep.
So there is benefit to aligning what our club is doing with what Rotary International sets as its priorities. And I'm on the Rotary International Press Center website, and hopefully you can see this screen now. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I've highlighted our causes, which is a pull down menu. And I think if we're doing strategic planning, it would help if we align some of the things or many of the things that the club considers to be its primary causes with the stuff that's available or that's identified as causes at the international level. Also would help, of course, if we remember that whatever those causes are, older versus younger generations may have different priorities. So ending polio for those of us who are older has been a major cause for a long time. But for the younger members, some of these other issues may be more important, and we need to make sure we rectify that, looking to the future to get younger members into the club and get them to stay and be engaged in the club. But the last point is that if we are aligned with Rotary International's clauses, then Rotary International's Press Center provides a ton of material we can use. So we can actually go in and populate our websites and our Facebook pages and so forth with material that's already been created by Rotary, and not have to, we want to supplement it with our own activities, but we don't have to reinvent it. And they have amazing photography and videos and other materials that we can use. So I mean, when our club is looking toward our strategy, I will make this recommendation that if we're happy with it, we should try to align with some of those that are Rotary International causes. And we do, generally speaking, do that. So anyway.
That's awesome. And that's perfect. And that, again, it speaks to that idea of strategic thinking, your execution planning and effectiveness. And within that, so not recreating the wheel, right? We are able to, use something and supplement it. And it's a fantastic example. Thanks for sharing, Paul.
This is Sheila again. First, I just wanted to say I've learned so much on this panel. It's just been amazing. And I'm wondering I know this exists. and the materials are out there for every club, but I'm wondering if there's like a blueprint that every time a club does an activity, there's a model press release for, because it seems like the more every service project we do is publicized, the more it will attract members from within our community, both members and volunteers. Always having Rotary recognized, whether it's with t-shirts we have made, whether it's the press release and materials in our local paper, but just having Rotary be more visible to our community members.
Right,
Sheila,
very
I can speak to that real quick. On our district website, through the Public Image Committee page, there is a social media toolbox. And then this dates back to even Paul. There's an actual press release template that can be followed. And so each public image chair from each club and each membership chair from each club will have all these emails sent to them with links and updates. And so we go back to saying how important those leadership roles are within the clubs, because that's how all of this information gets brought to the clubs.
Thank you.
Can people
Fantastic.
see the page that I shared?
Yep.
That's what she's talking about. If you go to the District 7090, go under committees, go to public image, and then there are several different tools you can use. And then I've clicked on, I think, one of these public image under support. And there's a whole bunch of information here available. And there's actually how to write a press release that I made available to the district in 2005 when I was public image director. So there's literally, this is from my old consulting business, a step-by-step how-to with call outs. And the public image committee in the district now is amazing. So if your own public image chair director doesn't have this information, then reach out to the public image committee at the district and they can work with you to help you develop your abilities.
All right.
Thank you.
I think we're supposed to be close to wrapping up here and in break time. So I guess, kind of maybe a round robin on parting thoughts and then we'll turn everybody loose. I'll take the action of everybody that participated, getting the slide deck and then, excited for future follow-up conversations and however we can be of assistance.
And I just put the link that I showed you in the chat.
Awesome. Yeah, and all that'll be recorded as well. So I guess we'll have to kind of get together with Lisa on that. It was interesting. It was a lot of different strings, but Penny and having these sessions recorded. So be able to kind of go back in and pull together some of those threads and conversation thought ideas as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Will you be providing contact information that we can come to you for more help?
Yes, absolutely. It's in the it's the last slide of the deck.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah,
Thank
very
you.
welcome. Very welcome all. So
Fantastic. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
you're very welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Right.